This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, the council meeting of March 16th, 2021 will now please come to order. Audience participation. Due to this meeting being a virtual meeting, council is asking if anyone would like to address council who is participating through the computer. Please use the chat feature now to let Clerk Massarolo know you have a comment, and you will be called on during the comment portion of the meeting. If you are calling on a phone or do not have access to the chat feature, we will give directions during the public comment portion of our meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mrs. Jones. Mr. Broussard.
Present.
Mr. Glassburn.
Here.
Ms. Heeman.
Here.
Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, I see that you're here, but I can't hear you. Go on.
No, can't hear you.
He'll have 5 minutes to dial back in and prove that he's here.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to continue on? We see that he's here. Mr. President.
Yes, we have not adopted those rules as of yet.
Okay. Mr. Limpert.
Present.
Mr. Schuman.
Present.
Ms. Williamson.
Here.
If there are no additions or corrections, the council meeting minutes of March 2nd, 2021 are approved as written. Hearing none, the minutes are approved as written. Announcements. The following legislation, we don't have any suspended legislation. Excuse me. We'll move on to reports. Mayor Kennedy, do you have a report this evening?
I do, Mr. President Pro Tem. I just would like to advocate for the two positions that Mr. Schuman talked about in caucus. The Economic Development Manager provides professional service and is a necessary position in our organizational chart. There is no funding in the 2021 budget for this position. Eliminating these outside services eliminates the position entirely. We will no longer have an economic development staff person. As the city deals, as every retail city deals with impacts from COVID, this is the most important time to have an economic development consultant because there is so much activity of people wanting to move in. You guys will have to ask yourself, for those of you that have been around for a decade or so, you voted for this 10 times. Have you been wrong all 10 times? The cities over the course of the last decade has seen incredible prosperity, redevelopment, and Greg's been at the forefront of that. He's been here since 2007. I can only tell you, when I'm cutting a ribbon, he's working on 3 other deals, right? He is kind of like the foundation. You know, when people come over to your house, they never compliment you on your foundation, right? They compliment you on your house, but it sits on that foundation. If that foundation is not strong, nor will your house be. Greg is truly the foundation here in the city for economic development. He's proven himself, and for a decade now, since I've been here, you've agreed with that. I want you to consider that when Mr. Schuman makes his recommendation for budget. Also, the technical assistance program, the small business technical assistance program will help to attract new business, but not only help attract new businesses, it'll help ease them coming in. The biggest problem that I have as a mayor is a business that's moving in calls me in the 9th hour and says, Mayor, I can't open. You know, the health department's not going to let me open, or I have to make these changes. And it's because in the upfront, they were not aware of, nor was their construction guy aware of all the things they needed to do. Now we can solve this problem very easily on the front end by doing this technical assistance program. Again, we will see, the reason this is so important is because of all the businesses looking to move in. Again, there is a tremendous amount in the pipeline, and we need programs like this to make sure businesses have a smooth transition into North Olmsted. And Mr. President Pro Tem, that concludes my report.
Law Director Guerrero, do you have a report this evening?
Thank you, Mr. President. I do not have a report this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Finance Director Kopfer, do you have a report this evening?
Yes, I do. And Mr. Guerrero, I thought that you would report that the Assistant Law Director has worked his magic once again and brought La Quinta up current in their hotel motel tax, and the owner calculated the penalty correctly and paid it all before March 20th. And there's ongoing discussions where Mr. O'Malley is going to be putting that into we're going to try and work into an escrow of some sort, so that in the future, when they're collecting these taxes up front, when people stay at their hotel, then they are going to get remitted to us rather than using them as cash flow for themselves. So that concludes the law director's report. But as the finance director, and I was involved in that as well, so I'll take some credit for it. But as you might be aware, as a result of legislation that was passed by the Ohio General Assembly in late March of last year, the employers have continued to withhold tax from their employees' wages for their normal workplace municipalities while their employees have been working from home or at another location due to COVID. And this has stretched on a lot longer than I think they ever anticipated it to be. One of the biggest unanswered questions, and it is a result of a lawsuit pending, is whether or not employees can receive a refund of this withholding from their normal workplace municipalities, since they didn't perform the work in this location. This question and others is subject in Franklin County Common Pleas Court, and it's the Buckeye Institute versus Megan Kilgore, who's the Columbus City Auditor. And we have already experienced, while this is working its way through the courts, taxpayers are requesting such refunds, and how they need to be able to, how they can do this. And Rita's approach, and they've advised us this, and they want us to remind people that these refund requests will be on a hold. They're going to hold them in a suspended status until the litigation is complete. They will neither issue those refunds nor deny the refund requests until the court issue is resolved. So they've also updated their application for refund and had put more information on their website to address this. But if people have questions on it, hopefully they can find their information at Rita's website or call them, because we are getting more and more questions regarding this. Today, the February monthly summary and detailed financial statements were emailed to council. As with the case in January, the property taxes were still running behind the prior year in February, though it may be due to the county pushing back the deadline more than a lower collection rate. The settlement for the first half will occur in March, and we'll have a better indication where we stand with property taxes at that point. The income tax collections are at the prior year level, which was pre-COVID, but we were down substantially from the year before. And withholding is about 3.5% down from 2020, while net profit is up by 73%. The withholding is the more consistent and reliable revenue stream, so this is more concerning than the net profits portion. Net profit seems to fluctuate from year to year. The American Recovery Plan Act was signed into law by the President on March 11th. Details are starting to come out on what the monies dedicated to non-entitlement cities, those under 50,000 population, which that's what we are, eligible to be expended on. We'll be receiving approximately $3 million this year, shortly after the state receives the funds, and then the remaining funds will be provided not less than 1 year from that date. And all funds must be expended by December 31st of 2024, which is much better than the rushed short time frame that was provided in the original CARES Act funding. I've been getting inundated with emails and notices and all this stuff, but there is Ohio Municipal League is having a webinar next week, which I hope will be informative. And if you want information on joining that, I'd be more than happy to send it, or probably the clerk has already received it. Lastly, I have a final comment on the budgeting process. I want to make clear that I respect that we all have a role in the budget process, and council's role is to control the purse strings. However, I do want to state on the record that I do not agree with the apparent majority of council regarding spending down the general fund and protecting the special revenue fund's resources. At this point, our city should strive to increase our general fund balance when possible, because this provides the greatest level of financial flexibility. We have the recreation fund and hotel motel fund, along with a few smaller ones that may need transfers if the public health emergency restrictions continue and they cannot hold their programs. General fund dollars can be used for any government need, while special revenue funds can only be utilized for the intended purpose of that particular funds. Once funds are in the special revenue fund, they cannot be transferred out for any other purpose. Now, I'm not saying that I support unlimited general fund balance and zero special revenue fund or reserve fund balances, which are different than special revenue funds, but a balancing act between is essential. In good economic times, increasing balances in reserves and special revenue funds can be helpful in addition to the solid general fund balance. I've strived for that in my 23 years as finance director. Moody's Investors Service, who they're looking out for the investor in our bonds, however, they are an independent source, looks at ratios of U.S. cities of general fund cash balance to percentage of revenue funds in the AA category, which it should be in the neighborhood of about 41.5%. But they consider Ohio credits, which are credits for cities and school districts, or cities have a higher exposure to risk, as income tax is a larger portion of municipalities' revenue stream than cities that are in other states. We are right at that range, but if we were to lower the general fund balance dramatically or make this a continued effort, this could jeopardize our AA2 rating that would cause future borrowing interest rates to go up. Additionally, the optics when a city's rating goes down implies poor management, which that includes not just the administration, but council too. In conclusion, I'm concerned for the shift in funds, as I stated clearly at the committee meeting, but if 4 members of council agree with this direction, then I can only advise of the potential consequences of such actions down the road. And that concludes my report.
Moving into committee reports. The Committee of the Whole met March 9th at 7:30 p.m. Present were council members Glassburn, Schuman, Heeman, Broussard, Kelly, Limpert, and Williamson, as well as the mayor, law director, finance director, wastewater treatment plant, chief of police, I believe, and the city engineer and guests. Discussion topic of the Committee of the Whole was 2021-15, which is the permanent budget. The meeting began with Councilman Schuman advocating for 3 amendments on behalf of the administration concerning community policing, consulting, and small business grants. Councilman Glassburn asked that those be split into items that were agreed upon by a majority and those that would be discussed further. That's what happened. Councilman Glassburn offered a variety of proposals and made an introduction to those. Councilperson Limpert objected to the salt truck proposal, but otherwise it moved forward. Councilman Glassburn then made a proposal for expanding the Small Business Relief Fund. Councilman Schuman objected, but it otherwise went forward, as well as a offset concerning the economic development consulting. Next was a amendment concerning historic cemeteries offered by Councilwoman Williamson. That was agreed to. Next was an amendment concerning city redistricting costs offered by Councilman Glassburn. There was discussion of what services would be provided or donated. Councilman Broussard asked if there was a conflict of interest, which the law director indicated there was not. However, through discussion, it was decided that it would be best to leave the money in the budget until the item is donated, if that is what happens. The next item concerned insurance for fireworks. Since fireworks are not going to be happening, that was agreed to be removed. The item following that concerned the North Olmsted magazine, which consisted of money for postage. Councilman Limpert was questioning as to why we wouldn't do the PAFR instead. The finance director indicated that the PAFR was being circulated digitally. There was discussion about whether the North Olmsted magazine could be distributed digitally, but the item moved forward. Finally, second to last, Councilman Heeman asked a variety of questions concerning the MUNIS system, which Director Kopfer responded to. Discussion continued upon that. And then we moved on to transfer amendments. Councilman Glassburn offered his proposal concerning transfer amendments, offering that the theory would be that this would protect road maintenance funds into the future. Councilman Limpert opposed, wanting to preserve funds in the general fund, as well as Councilman Schuman agrees with him. However, it moved forward. The final topic brought up was merit raises for a select number of employees, but there was not an agreed upon proposal, so no amendment on that issue was made. The committee of the whole concluded at 9:26. At this time, I will move to amend 2021-15 to include the following amendments, which were discussed in the committee of the whole and the legislation sent to council on Friday. To restore the $200,000 to the salt truck and the streets fund, to expand the small business grant relief program by $25,000 in economic development, to remove $20,000 from economic development for consulting, to add $2,500 in forestry for historic cemetery maintenance, to remove $1,700 for fireworks insurance, to eliminate $3,000 for postage for the North Olmsted magazine, to add in $17,500 for community policing and outside services, and to transfer 50% of the salaries and benefits costs of the streets employees back to the general fund. And at this time, I will ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Heeman. I believe. Any discussion? Okay, I'll ask for the clerk to do a roll call.
Mr. Glassburn,
Yes.
Ms. Heeman,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Schuman,
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Mr. Limpert,
Yes.
Mr. Broussard.
Yes.
The amendment is agreed to by vote of 7-0.
Mr. Council President Pro Tem,
Yes, Mr. Schuman.
at this time, I'd like to make a motion to transfer $25,000 from the general fund unencumbered balance for outside services in the Economic Development Fund for Small Business Technical Assistance Program. $10,000 will be used to contract with an architect to provide direct assistance to new business owners to help them identify and overcome code-related challenges in their building or tenant space. $15,000 will be used for mini grants to participating business owners for projects recommended through the technical assistance. And I would ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to amend by Councilman Schuman, seconded by Councilman Broussard. Is there any discussion? Councilman Limpert.
Thank you, President Council Pro Tem. My only comment is that if we're, I don't think there's a question of whether these services are needed. If there's questions or concerns, it would be on how and who provides those services, and I think that should be the point of discussion, not necessarily a budgetary item discussion. So I'm in favor of Mr. Schuman's proposal here. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Massarolo, please call the roll.
Mr. Schuman,
Yes, with comment. I know we talked about this, but I hope some of you will reconsider. We're at a crossroads. I believe we are entering a period of huge growth in this country. I read an article today in the Economist magazine estimating 5% unemployment by this time next year. The $1.9 trillion relief money and a pent-up desire to get out and do stuff, combined with the lowest ever interest rates and cheap retail space, makes this a very favorable environment for new business startups. Communities that invite small business and offer assistance will benefit. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Broussard.
Yes, with comment. I couldn't agree more with the rationale that Mr. Schuman stated behind his amendments. My vote is yes. Thank you.
Ms. Heeman.
No, with a comment. I did spend extra money to physically shop at our Disney store, then to take those things, wrap them up, go over to our local UPS store and send them to my grandchildren in North Carolina. A lot of people thought that was a little crazy because you could just go on Disney.com and get free shipping. We're losing our Disney store. Unfortunately, I heard from a business owner today that the biggest stumbling block she had in opening her business was our building department. So I don't think that a consultant should, be getting money and when in fact our building department needs to be a better customer service place. And so I do think that while we will need some outreach, I don't think that this is it. I don't think that it has worked well for us in the past, the things that have been attempted. So no, thank you.
Mr. Limpert.
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn.
No with comment. Like Councilwoman Heeman, I've tried to pay very close attention to what's going on with the businesses in our community. I believe that we are still in the phase that businesses need direct assistance and that we should be putting our full resources towards relief and not to consulting fees. Right now, we are moving forward a budget that we've spent a lot of time on. And we've, I think, in a relatively respectful manner, worked this out. So I believe at this time, we should focus our funds again to relief and revisit long-term proposals once we are past this stage. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
No.
Ms. Williamson?
No.
The motion fails by a vote of 4-3.
Mr. Council Pro Tem,
Yes, Mr. Schuman?
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we transfer $15,000 from the general fund for outside services in the Economic Development Fund for professional consulting services. These funds are used to cover professional services provided by the city's economic development manager. The economic development manager is a necessary position in our organizational chart, especially as the city deals with the impacts of the pandemic, changing retail market, etc. No other funding is included in the 2021 budget for this position, so eliminating these outside services effectively eliminates the position entirely. And I ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to amend offered by Councilman Schuman, seconded by Councilman Broussard. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Limpert.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem. Again, I think when we're talking about economic funds at this time and juncture, if there's a discussion about who and how those services are provided, I think that's certainly warranted, but I would disagree that we shouldn't fund this important service. And so that's just a comment. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Clerk Massarolo, please go ahead with the roll call.
Mr. Schuman?
Yes, with a comment. I'm not talking about our current manager here. That contract will run out on May 7th, and sometime before then, we will have a new contract before us. We can discuss that contract then. Right now, I'm asking that we keep the position, which may be more important now than ever, fully funded. Thank you.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
No.
Mr. Kelly?
No.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Ms. Seaman?
No.
Ms. Williamson?
No.
The motion fails by a vote of 4-3. Councilman Broussard, Chairman of the Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
I do, Mr. Council Pro Tem. Thank you. The Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee met on March 9th, 2021, beginning at 7:01 p.m. to discuss Resolution 2021-19, which reads a resolution dispensing with the RFP process and authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement for additional services for Records Imaging Service Incorporated for the purpose of scanning and indexing records for the mayor's court. I failed to mention, present were the mayor, directors Lieber, Garreau, council members Broussard, Limpert, Schuman, Williamson, Kelly, Heeman, and Glassburn, and guests. After a very brief discussion, which Mayor Kennedy essentially indicated that previously scanned records for the year, this is just catching up for the previously scanned records years 2013 to 2018, which happened in 2019. And the contract calls for $1,000 annually. Motion was made by myself to forward to all of council, seconded by Councilwoman Williamson, passed by a vote of 3-0. Our meeting concluded at 7:06 p.m. And that will conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Williamson, Chairwoman of the Building, Zoning, and Development Committee. Do you have a report this evening?
No, I do not, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Schuman, Chairman of the Finance Committee, do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening.
Thank you. Councilman Limpert, Chairman of the Streets and Transportation Committee, do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Heeman, Chairwoman of the Environmental Control Committee, do you have a report this evening?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Glassburn, Chairman of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, I do have a report this evening. The committee met on March 9th at 7:15 p.m. Present were councilpersons Glassburn, Schuman, Heeman, as well as Broussard, Limpert, Williamson, and Kelly, the mayor, the law director, the city engineer, the chief of police, and the superintendent of the wastewater treatment plant, and guests. The subject was 2021-21 concerning electronic meetings and establishing a code to regulate those. Councilman Glassburn did his best to try to introduce the legislation. Councilwoman Heeman indicated her support for members being present on video during the meeting. There was a question directed to Law Director Gros as to whether it was going to be required for electronic meetings to be voted on at a meeting in person prior. The Director Gros indicated that that was in the charter and would apply to all meetings. Councilman Glassburn asked if this code section would apply to simulcasts such as on Facebook or YouTube, and the answer was no. There was some discussion about if a member falls off or their microphone goes absent and the procedures there for the member to rejoin the meeting. Director Gros indicated that it would be required to verbally recognize votes in any format that we adopt. There was a vote of 3-0 to hold the legislation in committee, moved by Councilman Glassburn and seconded by Councilman Schuman, as well as a 3-0 vote to adjourn at 7:28. And that concludes my report. Councilman Kelly, Chairman of the Recreation, Public Parks, and Buildings Committee, do you have a report this evening?
No report this evening. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Are there any letters or communications to come before council at this time?
No, Mr. President Pro Tem.
Thank you. Audience participation again. Thank you all for joining our meeting tonight. At this time, council will hear comments from the public. Please remember to state your name and address for our clerk. If you live in a city other than North Olmsted, please state what city you are from. We will start with those who have notified us via chat. Anyone who has not notified us via chat, the chat feature, who would like to comment, please unmute your phone and start your comment when prompted. Council Clerk, has anyone notified you that they would like to comment?
No, Mr. President Pro Tem.
Thank you. At this time, if there is anyone on the computer or phone who would like to comment, please address council now. Seeing and hearing no other comments from the audience, we will now move into legislation.
Legislation on third reading. Ordinance 2021-12, introduced by Mayor Kennedy, co-sponsored by Council President Jones. An ordinance amending section 131.06, entitled Authority to Accept Donations of Chapter 131 of the Administrative Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Olmsted, entitled Mayor, in order to allow the mayor to accept donations not exceeding $2,000, subject to limitations and reporting requirements as amended.
Mr. Council Pro Tem,
Yes, Mr. Schuman.
I move for adoption of 2021-12. Ask for a second.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Schuman, seconded by Councilman Broussard. Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuman?
Yes.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Ms. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
The motion passes by a vote of 7-0, and the measure is adopted.
Ordinance 2021-16, introduced by Council President Jones. An ordinance amending section 107.15 entitled Financial Disclosure Statements Required of Chapter 107 of the Administrative Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of North Olmsted, entitled Code of Ethics, in order to amend the local filing deadline to match state law and declaring an emergency.
At this time, I will move that we adopt 2020-21-16 and ask for a second.
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 Moved by Councilman Glassburn, adopted, seconded by Councilman Limpert. Roll call, please.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes, with comment. I believe all of council thanks Council President Jones for bringing this to our attention.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Mr. Schuman?
Yes.
Ms. Seaman?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
The motion is adopted by a vote of 7-0, and the legislation is adopted.
Resolution 2021-17, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a one-year contract with ProCare Services, Stryker, in order to provide maintenance and repair services for LifePak heart monitors used by the North Olmsted Fire Department.
Mr. Council Pro Tem, I move for the adoption of 2021-17 and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion to adopt 2021-17 moved by Councilman Broussard, seconded by Councilwoman Williamson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes.
Ms. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Schuman?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
The motion is adopted by a vote of 7-0, and the legislation is adopted.
Legislation on second reading. Ordinance 2021-15, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. An ordinance to make appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures for the City of North Olmsted for the year ending December 31st, 2021, and declaring an emergency as amended. Resolution 2021-19, introduced by Mayor Kennedy. A resolution dispensing with the RFP process and authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement for additional services from Records Imaging Service, Inc. for the purpose of scanning and indexing records for the mayor's court. Legislation on first reading. Resolution 2021-22. A resolution authorizing the Department of Public Service to solicit quotes for the award of a contract to provide construction services for the 2021 Catch Basin Rehabilitation Program, and authorizing the mayor, following approval of the Board of Control, to contract for the same with the lowest and best contractors.
Mr. President Pro Tem,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
Resolution 2021-23. A resolution authorizing the mayor to purchase one Kubota mini excavator and trailer from Akron Tractor and Equipment at a cost of $102,596 through the state purchase program, and further authorizing the mayor to execute all contract documents and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President Pro Tem,
Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
Resolution 2021-24. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into contracts with the City of Fairview Park, Ohio, for the purpose of providing the City of Fairview Park with police dispatch services and for the further purpose of housing Fairview Park prisoners in the North Olmsted City Jail.
Mr. President Pro Tem,
Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to introduce, place on first reading.
moving into scheduling meetings for Tuesday, March 23rd. Councilwoman Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to schedule a Building, Zoning, and Development Committee meeting at 7:15 p.m. on March 23rd to discuss Ordinance 2020-145. And I would ask the Planning Director to be present and anyone else she deems necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. There will be a special council meeting on Tuesday, March 23rd at 7 p.m. to consider 2021-15, the permanent budget, on third reading. Moving into scheduling meetings for Tuesday, March 30th. Councilman Limpert.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. I would like to schedule a Streets and Transportation Committee meeting at 7 o'clock. Discuss an opportunity for the Clegg Road repave and safety grant. I would ask that the Planning Bill Director be present, as well as any other subject matter experts that you'd like to have.
Okay. Councilwoman Heeman.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. I would like to schedule an Environmental Control Committee meeting beginning at 7:20 to be ending at approximately 7:35 to discuss 2021-22 and 2021-23. I believe that the mayor will present. I'd also like our city engineer and our planning director. If there are any other construction services within our city that should be present, I would request them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The Intergovernmental Relations Committee will meet on Tuesday, March 30th at 7:35 to discuss 2021-24 as well as 2020-21, which is held over from a previous meeting concerning electronic meetings. I will schedule as well Committee of the Whole for, we'll say, 8 p.m. I'm sorry, for the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, I would ask for 2020-21-24 that the mayor or his designee be present. Moving forward to Committee of the Whole, I will schedule Committee of the Whole at 8 p.m. Also regarding 2021-21, the electronic meeting code. At this time, I will ask if there is a motion on the floor to excuse the absence of Council President Jones.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Broussard, seconded by Councilman Limpert. Roll call, please.
Mr. Broussard?
Yes.
Mr. Limpert?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Schuman?
Yes.
Ms. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Glassburn?
Yes.
Ms. Heeman?
Yes.
That motion is approved by a vote of 7-0, and we all wish the Council President well. I believe I may have done this out of order, but I will read it now just in case. I will be referring 2021-22 to Environmental Control, 2021-23 also to Environmental Control, and 2021-24 to Intergovernmental Relations. With the agenda being completed and there being no further business to come before this council, this meeting of March 16th, 2021 is adjourned at 8:45 p.m.